welcome. Thank you for taking the time and spending with us, either here or later in the recording. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we can add some value to your investing pathway in your life. We'd love to welcome Jason in. Thank you, Jason, from NewView Trust, to help us learn a little bit about IRAs, self-directed IRAs, and how they can be a really powerful tool in your investing journey and in your tool belt. So, Jason, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yeah. With me always is Eric Nelson as well. I'm sure most of you guys know Eric. We're just going to jump right in. And Jason, if you wouldn't mind, you just tell us a little bit about you and NewView and kind of how you got into the place that you are.
Happy to. Kind of a fun story to tell. Although it started 19 years ago, right out of school. I was graduating college and figured I'm working selling clothes at Macy's, and I probably should have some more relevant work experience. So I went to an internship expo, and I interned or took interviews with golf, big golf names, SeaWorld, big financial firms. And then I got to this tiny little company, NewView, and I couldn't figure out what they did online. I called my dad and was like, Dad, help me. I don't know what this company does. I have an interview tomorrow. And I'll never forget, my dad said, well, they deal with buying real estate in an IRA, but you're not allowed to do that. And I thought, all right, Dad says you're not allowed to do it. Here I am as a college kid. I'm all in now. And, here we are 19 years later. And what really struck me in the interview process with Glenn, who founded the company, was like, hey, we hear that all the time. And here's why you hear it. And here's why it's such a misnomer. And I've been there 19 years. I started we had about $60 million in assets, and we're about to eclipse 2.5 billion. So we've, had a pretty expansive growth. And that growth is really tied to a handful of things, but predominantly it's people realizing that they can own assets that they know, understand, like, can see, touch, and feel and make sense out of. And I won't say that automatically makes it better than the stock market, but I like my odds given all those things versus, buying stocks and bonds. And so it's thankfully, groups like yours are out educating, the markets to say, hey, this is an option, right? There's just more to your retirement account than just buying stocks and bonds. And that's what we do. We don't provide investment advice. So NewView is a passive custodian. We don't review, endorse, or approve investments, but we do work with groups, just like yours, where people want to invest and they want to not just buy, but they want the tax benefits. And so we serve that custodial role that allows them to access those asset classes that they think are best.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the goal here is to kind of get the education out, right? Like, we can get the word out that people can invest in other asset classes. Now, we like real estate just because that's our thing. We know it, like it, had success with it. There are other ways and other places to place your money, of course, right? Lots of people know the stock market. So I'm glad you said that. I mean, the goal here isn't to tell people it's one way is better or the other, but the option is there. If you find someone you can invest with, or you're investing in some other vehicle, let's just say you're buying a property on your own, you can still do that in your self-directed IRA. And so it's pretty exciting for people to hear. And it's interesting that even your dad said that too. I think it's so common to say, no, your IRA is for stocks, or your 401k is for your company match, and they have these three options, right? So I think I have a lot of questions leading up to this, but I just wanted to say that's the goal. That's the purpose of this webinar, is to get the word out. If you have some
100%.
retirement funds and you're not in love with where they are, there's other options out there. So we'll
Or
kind of
you may not even know where they are, right? Like, there's a lot of people
Excellent point. Yeah.
That's the truth. So before we go too far, I think most people have a familiarity. Jason, do you mind giving us a 30,000 foot view, even just saying SDIRA, a self-directed IRA? Can you give us sort of a definition of what that is, what it includes, what it doesn't include, who may be eligible and who may not, just so we can lay the groundwork for the beginning of the conversation here?
Yeah, happy to. And I think in its most simplistic state, an IRA is an IRA. Right? It's no different if you choose to self-direct it. The rules of IRAs, how much you can contribute each year, what the tax benefits are, those rules are the same no matter what you invest in. So a lot of times people think a self-directed IRA is this unique, complex, animal that's different. And the reality is it's not different at all. So an IRA is an IRA. If you have a Roth, you still have a Roth with us. You have a traditional, you still have a traditional with us. What differs is what you choose to invest the money into. And so think of it no different than when you choose to go out to eat. If you want a burger, you go to McDonald's. If you want a sub, you go to Subway, right? And you don't think differently. You just know that their menus are different. That's exactly how the custodial world works. If you want stocks and bonds, right, you have your Schwabs and Fidelities and Merrills, and they're all great companies. They help you do exactly what you ask them to do. And then you have your companies like NewView Trust that have just a different menu, right? The process is the same, the IRA is the same, but you now have access to buy other investment classes. So from a rule standpoint, the only thing you can't buy is life insurance and collectibles. It's the only two asset classes prohibited. The other kind of rule you've got to live within is you can't gain any personal benefit with your retirement money. So in other words, you can't buy a house that you intend to go live in, because the IRS says you can't get all the luxuries and tax advantages of the ownership, but still get to use it personally because your IRA is already earmarked for the long term. So as long as you buy passively and as long as you don't buy life insurance and collectibles, if you name it, it can be held. What you have is not an issue with your IRA today. If you want to do more with your IRA, you just simply have to transfer it or move it to a custodian that gives you a different menu of choices.
So I guess let's dive into some questions here, if you don't mind. So let's say you're listening and you say, "Cool, I want to buy a rental property." We'll give you the option that we have, and this isn't for promotion for us, but we will promote it a little. But let's just say, put our business aside. Let's say you're listening to this or watching this. You say, "I have some retirement money, and there's a condo down the street I'd love to buy." So a few questions I would ask is, to your point, I think there's some rules around that. It has to be a rental property, right? You can't live in it. And then another question we get all the time is any leverage. Are you allowed to kind of leverage, let's say 50% from a bank loan with your IRA? That may not be a question you can answer, but I think it's worth a question. Jason, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, very familiar. And the short answer is yes. You can leverage, and so that's a little more of a senior level discussion. But at a high level, you can leverage, and ironically use that 50%. That's the number I typically tell people. You may be able to leverage higher, but set your sights on that 50% mark, because in order to obtain a loan in an IRA, it has to be non-recourse. That means that you did not personally guarantee the loan. The loan is secured solely by the asset that you're buying. And here's what's super cool. You can get a non-recourse loan in an IRA to buy real estate. But guess what? No one will loan you money in a non-recourse fashion to buy stocks. Now, I'm, again, not painting a picture that stocks are bad and real estate is good. But if you just pause and think for a minute, why in the world, from an investment standpoint, would lenders be willing to lend at real estate at 50% with the asset as the sole collateral, and they won't do that in an IRA, right? Makes you scratch your head a little bit. But if you compound real estate with the power of leverage, now you're talking about, being able to really take advantage of tax advantage growth, which is a fascinating thing in an IRA, and the fact that you can use and exercise the power of leverage.
Okay,
That's awesome.
Real quick before we jump away from this tax advantage growth thing, and sorry, Ben, I feel like I'm kind of taking over here, but I just really like this conversation. So stop me if you need. But Jason, we talk about tax advantages. So here's another question we get all the time: is what depreciation can you use? My understanding is in a self-directed IRA, it depends, but maybe you can shed some light on that. Do you get to participate in depreciation as well, or the tax advantage is basically at the end?
Yeah, great question. And there's a little complexity to that. So again, I'll answer it in general terms, not necessarily to any specific, transaction. You get to participate in depreciation so much as you have tax to participate against. And if it's okay, I'm going to take a second here, and I want to tell just a quick dialogue, because I think this is the most exciting part. But this trips people up. I've had people literally tell me, if I can't get depreciation, why would I ever use my IRA? And I say, well, depreciation's a discount. That's like saying I'd never buy a new shirt if I didn't have a coupon. Well, what if I told you the shirt was free? Right? So there's a trade-off, and you do have to look at every deal, and good quality tax planning is the same. But, we'll use the three of us, right? Eric, Ben, Jason, in no particular order. If you think about the way the world works, I'm going to walk you through how taxes work and the difference in how people get wealthy. And I'm going to do it without touching an investment strategy at all, right? Because the investment strategy for a lot of people is actually the secondary piece. So if you take, and Eric, I'll start with you. Eric takes, we'll call it we'll use $1, right? And we'll double it every year for 20 years. Now, the way that works, if you double $1 every year for 20 years, $1, $2, then you pay tax, $2. Eric does it in a taxable account, right? That means that he owes tax, and we'll just say it for simplistic purposes at 25%. At the end of 20 years, right, Eric is going to sit around with his buddies and high five him and tell him how he turned a buck 20 years ago into about 85 grand today, right? That means that you made $1 pay tax, made, $1.75 pay tax, and so on. And then and you're high fiving like that's awesome. And that's what one class of the population does. And they celebrate that because they think it's success. There's a second tier of the population, right? We'll call that Jason. And Jason makes the same dollar investment into the exact same asset for the exact same time. But I do it in my traditional IRA because I know that I don't want to pay 25% tax each year. Now, the difference between Eric's money at the end of 87 grand and mine is a little over $1.5 million, $1.050 million.
Whoa.
So
That's
now
insane.
I'm sitting around with my buddies and I'm saying, hey guys, I took $1, put it in a traditional IRA because I didn't want to pay tax, put it in the same investment as Eric, and I made just about $1 million more than he did. And everyone is like, high five, Jason, you're brilliant, right? Same deal, same exact term, same exact amount, same exact time. And here I am, right, high fiving, thinking I'm the smartest guy in the room. And then there's a third class of people, the class of people that says, we want to eliminate taxes from our life. And that's Ben. Ben takes the exact same dollar and he puts it into a Roth IRA. He buys this same investment for the same 20-year period. And at the end of that, he has the exact same amount of money I do because it's all tax advantaged. However, at the end of my 20-year run, as I withdraw it, Uncle Sam's going to take a piece of it, right? So assuming that I'm in the 25% tax bracket, then I'm going to lose 25% of my just over $1 million. So I'm really at 750, 800. Ben gets 100% of his $1,050,000 tax free. So when we look around the world and we look at classes of people, it's not class in terms of anything other than they just simply think differently. And when it comes to building wealth, there's an equal value in good quality investments that generate good returns. But what the wealthy have really figured out is how to do it without paying tax. And so when we look at IRAs and you compare them to depreciation, yeah, there may be scenarios where it's better to buy it outside the IRA versus inside the IRA. You should look at that for every deal. But over the course of 20 years, doubling your dollar every year, the Roth IRA is going to win the game all day, every day, regardless of what tax discounts like depreciation you may give up as a result. So thanks for letting me go on that story for a minute. It's one of my favorite to tell because it just paints the picture of maybe we celebrate success a little too early, and we should always be kind of asking ourselves, great, I did it better, but is there an even better way? Is there an even better way? And that's really what the moral of that story is.
For sure. And I think that's the reason we're having this conversation, right? So there's a lot of folks that we're talking to that have the mindset of, hey, I need to invest. Hey, I'm looking at this ability to invest, but I don't necessarily know all the bits and pieces, or I don't know why one is better than the other, or one may be more advantageous, right? So I'd like to take a step back and say, hey, like, for example, this was me a couple of years ago. Like I had a couple of 401ks that we put some money into, or I'd like changed a job, or there was like somebody I worked with for a little while. And I have a couple of these different sets. If I'm looking to get into an SDIRA, right? Or maybe I have an IRA, or what are the stipulations, or like, what are the steps to say, I'm interested in this? What are the steps? And I know we're painting with broad brush here to get into an SDIRA.
Yeah, great question. Because there are some mechanics, and you actually gave, I think, the typical life experience for many. You work at 2 or 3 different jobs, right? Over a period of time, you save money, hopefully every chance you get into the 401k, at least enough to get the employer match, and then you move to another company. And what happens, and I think Ben said this earlier, we don't even know where our IRAs are, let alone what they're invested in. And that's just poor money management from the get-go, right? Don't be that person, because that's the fourth class of people, right? That's the fourth class of people that sit on their ass and then complain that they don't have any money and they wonder why all these other people do. But if you have retirement money, if it's already in an IRA of any type, it's portable. That means that you can move custodians at any time. There's no limitation. So if you have $100,000 sitting at Schwab, you can move that to NewView tomorrow or vice versa, right? Because it's an IRA, it's portable. The IRS has no restrictions on how often you move that between accounts. Now, if you invest it into something with a time horizon, that's its own issue. It's not an IRA issue. So for example, if you bought a CD at the local bank in your IRA for 5 years, you can move the IRA, but you may pay a penalty on the CD. Not an IRA issue, but a CD issue. 401ks can only be moved when they're your former employer. So in your case, you got a couple old employer plans. Those are great. You can move them, no issues at all. But if you were actively working, let's say for AT&T, and you've been there for 25 years, as a general rule, with very few exceptions, you can't move that money while you're gainfully employed. So you just have to kind of ask yourself, the first question is, where's the money? Not where's the money you remember, but where's all the money, right? And then total it all up, sum it all up, and just know that if you're an active employee under that existing plan, we can talk. There are some exclusions to get out of it, but as a general rule, everything behind that point is eligible to either roll over or move the IRA. But if it's still in that active employer plan, you may not be able to get to it.
Awesome. So let's play that game. I've got say 2 chunks of money. They're in old 401ks. I talk to you and I say, hey, I'm looking to invest in a few things. I've talked to Eric and Ben. They've got a couple of syndication opportunities. What are my next steps from there? Because I'm interested. And a lot of folks that we've talked to too is the SDIRA is interesting because it's similar in the sense that people are busy, right? And people are busy worried about making money and families and going to baseball practice and all. I'm listing my life at this point, like all the things that we need to do, right? But so it's finding something like a syndication or finding something that, like, I want a little bit more motive kind of control. I want to know where this money is going and not just picking a random volume of stocks, but I still want to be hands off. I have this money. What are my next steps to allow myself to be able to invest, for example, in a syndication?
Yeah, and I'll kind of highlight this first part, which is, to me, a syndication deal is like a mutual fund, right? If you kind of think about how the stock market works, you can either go pick your individual stocks, or you can go find someone that has expertise in certain markets and they ultimately pick the stocks. A self-directed IRA works the exact same way. You can go buy the properties yourself. You can go hunt and peck and look, and you have all the same challenges that come with buying an individual stock on your own. Now, for some people, they understand it, they know it, and that works for them. For many people, myself highly included, I'm busy. I don't have the time and effort. I know enough about real estate to where it makes sense to me, but I want to rely on professionals that are out in the market every day doing this as a career. So a syndication deal, what's nice about a syndication deal is it allows you to enter into real estate. It allows you to usually put eyes and ears on the property, right? Because it's not just a billion, dollar fund with properties all over the world. It's, hey, this is the property in this region. This is the property in this city, maybe even the city you live in. So what you're buying is still real estate, but you're buying it through a syndication. So the only thing that's different in that scenario is that on our statement, you'll actually see the syndication listed as your investment. So the way it works mechanically is, Ben, you've left 2 previous employers. You open up an account at NewView. You go to each old 401k and say, please process a rollover of the funds in my respective accounts to NewView. And then once it gets to NewView, you provide us with the subscription agreement and the investment paperwork, because we want to know that you've read it, approved it, because it's your deal, not ours. And then once we receive that, based on your direction and having money in the account, we wire the money, in this case, to the bank account for the syndication. We receive the shares or partnership interest or units, however it's structured. And those are held. And if there's dividends, they come back into the IRA. If there's a sale or distribution, or the investment matures, or there's a liquidation event, all of that money comes right back into your IRA. And as a general rule, it's going to be tax-free from a transactional basis.
Yeah, this is such a powerful tool. And I'm so glad, Jason, that you're kind of shedding some light again for us and for people watching. It's amazing how few people know that this is an option, right? And I know we've kind of hammered that point here today, but this is what we do, right? So what we do is single deal syndications. That's our thing. Like, we don't have a fund. We don't have 10 properties like you described. So it's like, as you invest, your IRA is a part owner in that property, right? And it's just a really cool system. So if you like real estate like we do, that's what you can do, is find an operator. Maybe Ben and myself, maybe another operator, that's fine. Invest with them and use your retirement funds in a way that are so much different than the S&P 500 or whatever it is that you're investing in, right? Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, like, it's the ability to pick and choose. And I think that and we're obviously very specific to real estate, but to your point, Jason, before, it doesn't just have to be real estate, right? Like there's a couple of other things, or you can find other investments. So it's a way to have a little bit more of, it's different than driving an automatic and a manual. Like you get to choose your gear a little bit, but you're still driving the same car in the same way, right? With that, I think that also just understanding some of the differences, like tax implications you've hit, like tax implications year over year, or any potential drawbacks or any watchouts. Is there anything that comes to mind, especially because we hear we hear all the great things, the awesome things, right? Like what do we need to be thinking about too? So in my example, I've got mine. I'm going to come and put the money in. I want to invest somewhere else. When you're talking with customers, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about? Also, not necessarily negatives, but like, hey, pay attention to this too.
Yeah, I think there's a checklist that everybody should kind of go through mentally before making any investment. And so the first question that we always want people to ask is, what is your retirement account able to do today, and what do you believe it could do tomorrow, right? And that's the first decision. If you told me, hey, I'm making 30% a year and I feel really comfortable in the stocks I'm in, I would never sell these. Then the answer should be, you should never do it either, as long as you feel comfortable. So the first question is do you know where your retirement account is? Do you know what it's invested into? And how comfortable do you feel about it? That's part A. Part B is, for most people, they're not going to get all three of those check boxes, right? And if they do, good for them. That's a great place to be. But for many, they don't, right? I have money in a retirement account that's in the stock market, and I don't have the slightest clue what to do, right? And that's just because it's a very difficult thing to understand. The second question then is, what could I or should I do as an alternative? So we kind of talked about do it yourself. And I love the manual versus automatic, right? What a great example. You can go do it yourself, right? You can go find these properties and you can negotiate them and buy them. And there's a lot of value in that. There's also time, expertise, and energy that's required for that too. The second thing or second way is to go find someone that has and manages investments for you, right? In your guys' case, you manage real estate, right? There's companies out there that manage loan funds, and there's companies out there that manage, crypto investments, and there's, you name it, and there's a place for it. So you have to look and just understand the spectrum. It's kind of like you don't pull off the highway to eat and just go to the first place you see, right? You look around and then you make an informed decision. Okay, we got Taco Bell, Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, right? What do we want? That's the first step in this whole thing, is what do you want? And then the latter step is, what's the best way to get there? Kind of like the directions, right? Punch it into your navigation system. How do I get there? I think what people don't pay enough attention to is they figure out what they want, but then they don't figure out how to get there. And that's, I think, the latter piece of this decision-making kind of process that people have to put themselves through. And then the last piece is, when you've mastered it all, is understanding what investments fit best in what account. So, if you guys are putting together a deal that has bonus depreciation and really big upfront tax benefits, right? Then maybe that's better outside an IRA, because somebody may actually need that and benefit, and that's okay. Or maybe they'd rather have all the gains that they believe are going to come from it in a tax advantage manner, and they're willing to give up the depreciation. But the perfect world is when they're at least looking at each deal and thinking through as one decision individually each time. We tend to make the same decision every year for the same reason, but our tax situation changes every year. The tax rates change, every year. Our life events change every year. So it's kind of like saying, I put my money into a traditional IRA when I started it 8 years ago, so I keep putting into the traditional IRA. Well, a lot's happened in 8 years. A Roth IRA may be 10 times better for you today, but most people won't take the time to go evaluate that. They'll just do what they've always done. So kind of a long answer to a short question, but I think it's a series of events and a series of questions that you've got to challenge yourself with and really make sure you're making the best choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, Jason. I mean, some people feel uncomfortable talking about money, and that's fine. That's our culture. But it's sometimes good to shed a light on these things and say, all right, it's time to get real about finances. Like, we'll take the time to not go to Starbucks and save $4, but we won't take the time to say, what is the tax advantage or the best tax strategy for me this year? And those are two very different things and, different times, but you get the point. Is like, okay, sometimes it's worth a little bit of effort year over year to say what's valuable. A couple of things to talk about too beyond this. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but depreciation really is just kicking the can. It's kind of like a 1031. So sometimes appreciation is great, right? Like if you have a huge tax situation one year and you need to offset it, but in reality, a lot of that gets recaptured anyway. So from my perspective, your analogy of the $1 doubled every year thing is actually a better analogy than to say you can grab this bonus depreciation, cool, and defer some taxes until later, when in reality, sometimes the bigger picture is more important, right? That might be good for one year, but what's better for you for the reality of the whole thing? And that's where a good custodian and a good CPA can really kind of shed some light on, all right, let's take 1 hour every October and go through this. What's the best scenario for me this year? You know, and this is great to bring this up and say, if you're watching this, set that time right now with your CPA, October 12th. Call them and just set an appointment for an hour and say, what do I need to do this year to finish out the year for me to be in a better position 5 years from now? And that will go a very, very long way. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and I love hearing you talk about CPAs and professionals, and I mean that's probably the thing I see the most is, you know, we live in a world where everyone says, you know, you just turn on the HGTV and you can do it all yourself. You know, go on to TurboTax and you just do it yourself. And, you know, do I think there's professionals that aren't worth the money? Of course there are. There are plenty. But do I think that there are professionals that are worth every single nickel you pay them and then some? The answer is, of course. So my best advice to people is don't go at it alone. You know, find good quality professionals, and you know, a good conversation, to your point, Eric, with your accountant on October 12th. Even if they charge you $200 for the hour of their time, if they save you $5,000 on your taxes, that's a dang good investment where I come from.
Yes. Well, it's also about, I think the culture is too, paying attention. It's easier to ignore than sometimes it is to pay attention. Sometimes it's scary, right? Like people have gone a long time, and I was this way where I was on the road for a very long time, and we did some things that like I had to take a step back, like, oh, we should have been doing this for a long time. As part of the conversation we have all the time is we really want to be advocates and help people see things that, like, I tripped over certain things, right? Like I've learned this. We're not here to preach or tell you how to live your life, but there are resources and there are people like Jason that can help shed some light and really provide a better path forward. And that's really what we're here to do, is have this conversation. So to kind of bring it back and to wrap it all up, is there anything else that we need to be focused on? Say again, I'll bring it back to the syndication piece. I come to you, I say, hey, we rolled in, I'm interested. I'm going to put 50 grand into the syndication that has a 5-year time horizon. If I come to you with that conversation, give me just like your 5-ish top line checkpoints. I know you provided a few, but questions to ask for the syndicator, because I know you're not trying to steer people a certain way. But is there any advice that you can say, like somebody listening to this on the fence about if they want to roll into an SDRA, get into, you know, obviously not collectibles, but if they want to do real estate, want to do something else, what should they ask those top 5 questions, or for you or for anybody else for a custodian?
Yeah, and I'll kind of toggle between both the account and the investment, right? So the first question they should ask is, based on what I know today, what's the best retirement account for me to establish? And I get this one a lot. I've got a traditional IRA. I need to open a traditional IRA, you know, and I say, great, we're happy to do that. Have you considered converting it to a Roth IRA? Right. So you can make changes in your account type as long as you're willing to pay the tax. And by willing to pay the tax, it's not a penalty. Right. And when people say, like, I don't want to pay tax, I'm like, that's a bold lie. Do you want to make money? Yes. Well, of course, then you want to pay tax. Now, I'm not suggesting we don't want to minimize it or eliminate it where we can, but at the end of the day, tax is a result of making money. And last time I checked, everybody wants to make money. Therefore, as a result, everybody wants to pay tax, right? We just don't, we view it as such a negative, and it's not at all. It's a positive, right? Again, I want to pay as little as possible, and I may not agree with where the tax money's spent and the left side of the aisle and the right side of the aisle. That's its own issue. But ultimately, making money means you got to be willing to pay some tax along the ride. So the first question is, am I opening the right type of an account? The second question is, are there additional accounts that I can open? Right? I'm a big believer in save till it hurts and save in the right places. The rest of it figures itself out. But you can't make an investment, going back to our 3 people talking about that buck, right? Well, guess what? If you don't have the buck, you're not even in the story. Even if you're in the lowest class of results, you're not even in the story. So it starts with the buck, right? So the second question asked is, are there other account types? If you're self-employed, can you set up a 401k for your business? If you've got kids, can you open educational savings accounts for them that can be self-directed? If you've got high deductible insurance, which a lot of entrepreneurs do, can you open up an HSA account? All of those accounts can be self-directed and combined to make the same investment or similar investments. The third question I'd ask is, what's my time horizon for investment? Somebody that's 75 should be thinking differently than somebody that's 25, right? They obviously can't lock their money up as long, right? So that would be the third question. Fourth question would be, do I want to go find my own investments, right? Or do I want to find operators that can help me with that process where I could be a partner with them? Because that's a big question. And then the fifth question is, what have I done to due diligence this asset? It sounds good, right? And maybe it's everything that it says it is, but what have I done to just validate that? And so I'm a big believer in the due diligence process. I think most people, when they make investments that don't work out the way they want, they usually shortcut some form of due diligence process. So money is personal. I've done deals for 10 grand and I've asked probably more questions than somebody that put $1 million in. And I start my comment with, hey, it's my 10 grand and I want you to know it means a lot to me. Right. And so I may pepper you with questions. And if that's a problem, just tell me now and that's okay. But I'm not going to feel comfortable putting my money into this deal without 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 questions being answered. So due diligence is critical on the asset, on the issuer, on the operator. Just make sure you understand, how do we get in? How do we get out? And what is, what's a perfect world look like? And I really like people to think, if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, what's the exit?
Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah.
So I think, Jason, you and I align. I love when investors ask a million questions. I mean, one, it gives me confidence that they're taking the time to understand the risks, right? And I love that question of, what's the worst case scenario? Because all investing has some risk involved. And so we are very transparent and honest about that in general, but I love those questions, man. And thanks for being so clear, because if you're looking at pretty much any investment, you should be asking questions. Hey, what does this look like? What's the time horizon? What if it goes bad? What if it goes really well? Yeah, how do I get out? All those things, right? So I think those questions are great. I know that this has been, we meant to keep this top level, but we did go into some detail and threw out a lot of words and things out there. So if you're listening, I just want to put mine and Ben's email out there. If you're watching this webinar, ben@wildoakcapital.com and eric@wildoakcapital.com, email us. We'll get you in contact with NewView if you want to kind of go down this path, and we'll contact you and get you connected, even if you don't want to be involved in real estate, because we believe in this so much. I think the other asset classes beyond the stock market need to be open to investments in general, but also to retirement accounts. So this is a really powerful conversation. I just wanted to toss our emails out in case people had more questions beyond today.
I was going to say the same thing. We love having these conversations, and again, connecting with you. If it's in service of the greater good, we definitely want to be able to help you no matter what. But also would love, Jason, how can people get in touch with you directly as well? It doesn't necessarily just have to be through us.
Yeah, the couple ways. I guess email being the easiest, and that's Jason, Jason, at newviewtrust.com, spelled with a U. I think you guys will probably drop that somewhere in the notes so people have it. And then the other thing, I would encourage you to go onto our website. A lot of people say you should never point people to your website, right? That's passive. And my viewpoint is, it's exactly right. And for a lot of people, they need to spend 30 minutes on the website and acclimate and feel comfortable. If they want to call or email or text after that, of course, we're all ears and we're here to serve. But our website's great because it's got a lot of video content. It's got a lot of editorial content. And I mean, you could literally spend days on it and probably not see it all. But that's newviewtrust.com, spelled with a U, newviewtrust.com. But yeah, take a look at the educational tab. If you have 30 minutes to spend on a Wednesday night, I can tell you with 100% certainty, our website will serve you better than TikTok. Right? That's the one guarantee.
Not true,
that
Jason.
I can throw out there. So,
disagree, dude. Disagree.
I'm not saying to not put 30 minutes into TikTok. I'm just saying if you got to choose, that's a guarantee for sure.
Well, this is great. And truly, this is a much longer conversation than I think we have time for in a single conversation. So part of this is going into an ebook we'll put out and we'll credit you. But additionally, every person's situation is a little bit different. So we always love having these conversations with experts like yourself, Jason. Please take the time, reach out. If you have questions, find somebody that you can ask a real question of and actually learn the answer. Don't just go it alone. There's no reason to do that. Everybody has a different situation. Everybody has a past, whether you're great with money, terrible with money, you have a lot, you have a little. It's always time to get started. So please reach out. And we really appreciate you spending your time with us, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.